very special guest. This is Devon. And Devon, he does MMA, mostly Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he's part of American Top Team. I always say that wrong, American Top Team. There we go. It's almost like a tongue twister. But anyways, Devon, welcome.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, so tell me about your martial arts journey. How did you sort of get involved in martial arts? How did you end up part of what you do now?
All right, so my martial arts journey starts really from probably from way back, I would say in middle school because I used to be like the smallest kid in school. So I was like the short kid. I wore glasses, braces, people picked on me a whole lot. And so I decided to start wrestling when I was in 7th grade. So when I was in 7th grade, I was wrestling, and then I wrestled in 8th grade. And then when I got to high school, I ended up leaving wrestling for indoor track. And then I wanted to get back into wrestling, so I ended up wrestling again my senior year, but I wasn't able to compete for the team because I was already on the track team.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to end up just practicing with the team, and I spent a lot of time with the wrestling team just practicing, and I actually stayed with one of the wrestlers on the team. Like we actually lived together,
Wow.
so that was a pretty dope experience. So when I got to college, I went to Morehouse College, and funny thing enough, Morehouse is like the only all-male school in the country that does not have a wrestling team.
Wow.
And so we didn't have a wrestling club either at the time. So I saw a flyer one time my junior year. I saw a flyer up at the school about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu lessons. So I decided to go to my first class. Shortly after I did a couple classes locally, I met my friend Wayne, who trains with me at American Top Team. I met my friend Wayne in the weight room, and he had a Chicago Open IBJJF shirt on, and I was like, "Hey, bro, like, do you do jujitsu?" And he was telling me like, "Yeah, I do jujitsu. I train at American Top Team." And then from there, I went on and trained with him at American Top Team. I'm actually originally from Maryland, so I went home to Maryland that winter break and trained with Lloyd Irvin for about a month. And at the time, I was a boxer, so I went into Lloyd Irvin trying to train for boxing and ended up falling in love with jiu-jitsu there. After I got beaten in a roll by a 15-year-old girl at the time, who ended up becoming a world champion at blue belt. She beat me in a roll pretty bad, and then that made me fall in love with jiu-jitsu. And from there, I focused more on jiu-jitsu. I came back to Atlanta and then joined American Top Team full time, and I've been training with them ever since January 2017.
Wow. So, let's go back into kind of your childhood a little bit. So, the community that you grew up in, was martial arts really big in it, or was it like kind of not really a big type of martial arts community?
It wasn't really big on martial arts, actually. It was a lot of people were really into basketball. So my original dream was to become I grew up in suburban Maryland. I lived in Prince George's County and Montgomery County,
Okay,
Maryland.
I'm from Montgomery County, so you
Oh,
were in
okay.
PG County and Montgomery County, so we're actually kind of from the same area.
Oh, okay, what part of Montgomery County?
I'm from the quote unquote the rich part, Bethesda,
Oh,
but I
okay, nice.
wasn't rich, but I went to school with a lot of rich kids.
Yeah, no, I understand. I went to Gaithersburg High School, so
Hmm.
yeah, so yeah, well, hoop dreams are real big in that part of Maryland. So, at the time, I really wanted to. My dream was to be this basketball player in the NBA. I thought I was gonna go to University of Maryland and then end up graduating from there, and then going to the NBA. But I mean, I was at the time, I was like 4 foot like 6 or something like that. I was so short, and then when I got to high school, I kind of grew a little bit. But I was never really that tall or that big or really skilled or coordinated in basketball.
Hmm.
I found a lot more skill when I started wrestling. I found a lot more success, and then also wrestling not being a team sport, I didn't have to rely on the coach, giving me playing time or anything like that. So I found and then that's kind of what made me love track as well. Kind of the same situation there. So it wasn't martial arts weren't huge. I didn't know too many people that were big in martial arts until later on when I came back and met Lloyd Irvin and the guys from Lloyd Irvin Martial Arts.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So I was in Montgomery County for about 8 years, and just thinking about, because I did kung fu, but my parents had to drive me to Virginia Like,
Oh,
so like I know there was a kung fu school there. There's a Yim Tai school or something, like a Yim Tai kung fu, and then a Dennis Brown kung fu. I think that was it when I was there. And then more kung fu schools started opening up. But like, and then yeah, I mean, the martial arts in Maryland's like really weird. Like Mario Yamasaki, I believe, has a few schools around there. But like
yeah.
I didn't know about it until much later.
Yeah, I didn't find out about Mario Yamasaki's schools until I was like a freshman in college.
Yeah.
One of my friends from Spelman, her father was a referee for what we have our local fight scene called the NFC.
Hmm.
He actually refereed at UFC 145 as well, which was in Atlanta. And
Hmm.
so he yeah, so he was the one who told me about the Yamasaki brothers. But at the time I was a freshman in college. I had no money. So I couldn't train. You know, I
Yeah.
couldn't go anywhere and train. But I found out about the Yama. I had no idea, and I always loved the UFC. I always followed it. Had no idea that the Yamasaki brothers had a gym in Maryland.
Yeah, yeah. And it's also interesting because um, you know, you spent like your middle school basically, like you said, you were kind of smaller and you had like glasses and braces and everything. Did you find that when you started wrestling, when you started martial arts, did people who pick on you, did they stop immediately or was it kind of more gradual?
You know what? They actually didn't. It was
Uh-huh.
kind of weird. Like people didn't respect wrestlers. Like
Oh.
people would make all types of stereotypes for about wrestlers and they didn't really people didn't really respect wrestlers. You know, a lot of the guys that I wrestled with were like just like me, you know, kind of smaller guys, you know, a little I guess more on the nerdy side or whatever. So,
Hmm.
you know, they didn't respect wrestlers like they would respect basketball and football players, which you know, I played football but wasn't really my sport to be honest. Like I
Hmm.
you know, I was never really overly skilled in football. And I also played baseball, which I was a little bit better at, but still, you know, like they didn't give that proper respect for wrestlers, I don't think.
Yeah, I find that so interesting too because like when I went into high school, I went to Walter Johnson High School, and it was the same. Like I can tell the wrestlers could beat anyone, you know, knowing what I know now about martial arts. But back then, like you would look at a wrestler, you're like, oh yeah, he can throw you. Oh, so what, right? That's how it used to be. But
Yeah.
now it's like people who really watch MMA or like train, they're like, wow, we don't ever want to mess with wrestlers because wrestlers even give BJJ people a hard time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's true. You know, just some of the people that, you know, I hung out with like when I wasn't wrestling and other people were wrestling in high school, you know, the wrestlers, you know, definitely probably had the upper hand on a lot of people, but people didn't care, you know. I mean, everybody wanted that tough guy, you know, wanted to be the tough guy, you know,
Yeah.
and they wanted to fight with the hands. Nobody thought about how wrestling could impact them in a fight or you know whatever. But at the same time, when I was in high school, people didn't really pick on the wrestlers though. You know that kind of ended in middle school. You know, middle school is a little bit more, especially like in Maryland. I guess middle school is a little bit more rough. So
Yeah, yeah. In Maryland, it's weird, especially like a Montgomery County and PG County, like the two counties we're talking about. In middle school, it's like very diverse. And then, you know, in high school, people kind of like go into their own kind of segregated, you could say, cliques. But middle school is when it's like you get people who are quote unquote more ghetto, you get people who are quote unquote more rich. It's like a very weird melting pot. And that's when like a lot of the conflicts happen.
yeah, it was like you know, people really judge you on like the way you dress and the way you speak and I mean all types of stuff. When I first came to Maryland, you know, I lived in Jersey before I lived in Maryland. I moved around a lot, so
Mhm.
before when I first came there, people made fun of my accent and you know people made fun of the way I dressed. So it was like you know it's like so many different things. Like you have to fit all these different types of stereotypes, especially in the DMV where like fashion is everything
Oh, yeah.
and
Yeah.
like appearance and all that stuff is everything. So you know like that was always I was always at a disadvantage in that category.
Yeah, yeah, especially DMV because it's called the DMV because it's all like everyone there basically works for some like advanced prestigious research institution or works for the government, right? So like it's like a big type of facade type of area. Everyone thinks they're like quote unquote the shit, right? So it's
Yeah.
like you said, there's a lot of kind of like you have to act a certain way, dress a certain way, talk a certain way, or else like I can't even imagine. Like thank goodness I grew up in the Midwest kind of, so I just don't have an accent. Well, like you coming down from Jersey, you had a Jersey accent, so everyone was probably like, "What is up with this kid?"
Right. Yeah, that was yeah. It was just like make asking me to say stuff or like why are you you know at the time I mean back in Jersey it was okay to wear Timbs in the summertime Like people, I come to Maryland, they're like, "Why are you wearing Tim?" You know, it was just crazy. It's just like little stuff like that.
And was the reason you moved around kind of because of work or something, or was it other circumstances that caused you to move around so much?
Man, it was you know, it was actually kind of crazy. My childhood had a lot of different circumstances. You know, money. You know, we didn't grow up with a whole lot of money, and so a lot of times we were moving around. You know, whether it's for money reasons and also because my dad. You know, a lot of times we were trying to get away from my father. You know,
Oh,
and things like that. So I haven't lived with my dad since I was like 2 years old. So
wow.
like crazy enough, you know, my dad actually wrestled in college, and
Hmm.
you know, and I didn't even know that until I was an adult. You know, I didn't realize that that was like something that ran in my blood, but um, but you know, just a lot of different circumstances led to us
Wow.
moving around. Like even in middle school, I attended three different middle schools, but I attended them like four different times. So I went to my sixth grade year. You heard of Julius West? If you
Yes,
just
Julius West. Yes.
yeah, so my sixth grade year I went to Julius West, and then my seventh grade year I went to Forest Oak. Then I had to leave Forest Oak because of some behavior issues, and then I went back to Julius West, and then I went to Gaithersburg my eighth grade year. So it was like I was just moving around, moving around. When I was in, and then when I was in elementary school, I was between PG County and Rockville. So it was like, you know, I was just constantly that kind of added to the you know kids picking on me and stuff. I was always the new kid,
Mm,
so that didn't really help either. And
wow.
most of it was due to financial circumstances and even the reason why I lived with my friend my senior year was also due to financial circumstances. So, you know, it definitely sucked living in Montgomery County, like you said, which is a big melting pot. You know, like being the kid that didn't really have a whole lot of money because people are so flashy and you know they're so focused on money and you know kind of having this look. So being that kid that didn't really have it, was you know kind of made me feel kind of low most of the time that I was there. So
Yeah.
I kind of like put most of my value in sports a lot actually because of that. I had to keep myself busy.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like sports helped you a lot. And I'll just tell one story for audience members too. My high school had open lunch, and basically every single person in my high school somehow had the money to like go to the mall or go somewhere and get lunch and come back. Like I never had that money. So like I would just eat at the cafeteria or I would like pack my own sandwich. My mom would pack my sandwich, but it was the same thing. I was like, I always felt left out. I'm like, I don't have the money to like go to different stores for open lunch and like buy stuff. And I know exactly what you mean. It's crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like we actually had open lunch our freshman year of high school, and it was like kind of the same thing. You know, people would go out eat lunch. You know, I was on free lunch, so I would just you know get my food from the cafeteria and keep it pushing type
Yeah.
thing. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. Wow. So, I mean, it sounds like your childhood was slightly more rough than maybe what some of the other people I've interviewed on this channel, but it sounds like sports really helped you out. And when you decided to do what you do now, was that part of the reason? It's like, you know what, sports has helped me so much. I just want to keep going with like martial arts and MMA and all that.
Yeah, like so when I got to college, I instantly had regret for not having a longer wrestling career. So
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted to join a wrestling club in college or a mat club or something. And my friend Marshawn and I actually tried to start a wrestling club at Morehouse multiple times. And it just didn't work out. So when I saw that flyer for BJJ, I mean, I really wanted to get back into sports because when I got to college, my senior year of high school, I ended up tearing my hamstring playing
Oh,
football and running track. So like I pulled it playing football, tried to come back early, you know, without good advice. You know, the doctor told me not to, but my coaches didn't really care that much. I tried to come back and I ended up tearing it later on. So I was done for when it came to sports like track and football. And I really wanted to do something in college, but they didn't have a wrestling team, and I knew I couldn't run anymore. So um, I ended up gaining like 25 pounds my freshman year. I mean, I went from like 140 to like 165 with like no muscle mass, and I ended up getting to as heavy as like 168. So
wow.
like I realized, my friend Winston helped me realize actually that I was just getting really out of shape. Like I was
Wow. So
getting,
you and him went to the same college?
Yeah, we went to the
Okay.
same college. Yeah.
Nice. By the way, for viewers of Fight Commentary Breakdowns, I know Winston too, so that's why I got excited when he talked about Winston.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Winston actually helped me realize that I was getting so bad out of shape. Like, and it was just like, Winston and we started out just working out in the house together. We actually lived in the same house. So we were
Mm.
working out in the house, just doing push-ups and stuff. And then shortly after that, I found that flyer for jiu-jitsu. And I was like, this is my chance to get back to grappling, which was something I regretted not having a longer career. And so I was like, I noticed the similarities between jiu-jitsu and wrestling. So I was like, you know what, this would be a good chance. And then, Morehouse had a boxing club. So I was like, I'm going to join this. And that's where I kind of was like, let me, do boxing and jiu-jitsu and let me really get back into the things that made me happy when I was in high school, and also the things that kept me in shape, because I really needed to get back in shape. It was becoming a problem. So.
Mm-hmm. Wow, wow. And so I remember you said that first jiu-jitsu class, there's this girl who later became a world champion, like really smashed you around and everything. When in your jiu-jitsu journey did you feel like you're not swimming in deep water anymore? Like you felt like you're finally starting to get it?
I would say probably after year 2.
Mm-hmm.
So year 1 was just spent with like a whole bunch of injuries, nagging injuries, because I was what they call a spaz on the mat. So I was always going 300%, but with no technique, because I was so used to being a wrestler. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to take people down, double leg, stay on top, and just try to smash. And the problem is at 100, I'm right now like 150 pounds. So at 100, but at the time I was probably like 140 pounds. At 140 pounds, you can't smash too many people. You're not big enough for that. So I learned my lesson kind of quick, just from getting beaten up a little bit, from people of all belt classes. By year 2, I learned how to play in my guard and be more patient with my game. And that's when I realized that I wasn't just swimming in deep water all the time. I was actually having decent rolls with people of all belt levels. It wasn't like I was going to get on the mat and somebody was just going to tap me 4 or 5 times in the first minute. It was going to be that I was going to have a good roll, and we were going to go all 5 minutes, go hard. And I noticed that my jiu-jitsu really tremendously improved when I took a trip back to Maryland, back to Team Lloyd Irvin, and I was actually having decent rolls with the guys at Lloyd Irvin, as opposed to the first time I went to Team Lloyd Irvin and got smashed and pretty much, I got smashed by a 15-year-old girl, and then pretty much everyone else smashed me, and I kind of was like, whoa. But that's what made me love it, though. I love the fact that jiu-jitsu can be anybody's game, because it's more about technique than anything else.
Yeah, exactly. So, where do you see yourself next in kind of your martial arts journey? Like, do you want to go pro eventually in MMA, or do you want to be a jiu-jitsu coach? Tell me more about that.
So, actually, I see myself next being a coach. So I've already been working with kids a little bit, for jiu-jitsu here and there. And I also coach baseball at a high school now. So I'm a teacher. That's my full-time profession. So I'm a teacher, and I coach baseball and softball. So I've actually been coaching kids in jiu-jitsu as well. So I see myself just continuing on in my coaching journey. I really love coaching. It brings me a lot of joy and pride to be able to watch people develop from the lowest levels to become higher level, especially with youth, because I work with kids every day being a teacher. So I did have aspirations to go pro in jiu-jitsu, do a couple pro matches. I competed at Worlds last year. I didn't win, but I did go out there and compete. So I will continue to compete in jiu-jitsu. I used to have aspirations in going pro in martial arts as well. I did a little bit of cross training with Muay Thai and everything, but just seeing that that I have, I'm a career man, so I've got to put my career first.
Yeah.
Coaching might be the better avenue for me. Just because I'm not getting much younger at all here, so I'm still young, but definitely focusing on my career, and so I still love jiu-jitsu, so I will, definitely, I might not be able to be pro or be the best in the world, but I feel like I can make a great impact as a coach. So that me.
Tell me about the world's competition you did, like, because most people who, let's say, don't know much about jiu-jitsu probably don't even have an idea of how the competition works. Is it like the bracket type of format where you have to like beat a person and then move on to the next opponent kind of thing?
Yeah, so Worlds is pretty tough competition. I'll tell you, when when I was on my way to Worlds, I ended up being on the plane with one of the guys that was competing in a higher division than me.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I got to Long Beach, you could already feel the atmosphere, just from seeing the other BJJ guys in the airport. And then when I got to Walter Pyramid, I mean, I saw guys that had Olympic warm-up suits on from I guess they did judo for. I saw guys with like the Japanese judo Olympic team warm-ups on. So these guys are really top of the line athletes. So the atmosphere was completely different from anything I had ever seen. And in the IBJJF, it's a one and done bracket. So you either win and keep going, or you lose and go home. So that's the level of intensity that it brings. And I believe I had 68 guys in my bracket at Worlds. So it was a pretty tough. Worlds was met with a whole lot of adversity for me. As soon as I got off, I ended up getting sick. I ended up catching the flu. So I ended up being really sick. But I kind of battled through having the flu, being kind of like, and then weight cutting at the same time. So it was really tough for me. I ended up losing my first match. It was really tough for me, but I was glad I went out there and tried it. I kind of went out there by myself. I didn't have any coaches with me.
Wow.
And that's something that I definitely regret. Because I've noticed that I've had a lot of success in tournaments where I have coaches with me,
Mm-hmm.
and the ones where I don't, it sometimes doesn't go my way. I've had a couple tournaments with no coaching where I've gotten decent results, but I definitely have better results when I have my team with me. So, yeah.
Wow. That's wow. So, so you mentioned that you found out that your dad was a wrestler. How did you end up reconnect? If this is too personal, we don't have to talk about it, but like, how did you end up reconnecting with him? Was it kind of like through martial arts, or you kind of just one day started talking about him and then you guys mentioned the wrestling? How did that happen?
So it was just crazy. Like, I was just having a conversation about my dad with my mom.
Mm-hmm.
My dad and I never really had a successful way of reconnecting. We talked off and on Facebook, but we didn't really have much of a productive conversation. But my mom and I were talking, and my mom was just telling me, she was like, well, nothing you do surprises me. And I was like, oh, what do you mean? She was like, well, because she was like, a lot of things you do are things that your dad was interested in. And she told me about his wrestling. And my sister ended up telling me, I guess my sister spoke with my dad, and she was telling me why he ended up wrestling. So he was also a baseball player, so which is another thing that I'm very interested in. My dad played baseball, and he played professionally overseas. And one of his baseball coaches in high school was pretty racist, so he ended up leaving his baseball team in high school, and he ended up joining the wrestling team, and that ended up getting him a scholarship to college. He still ended up playing baseball and wrestling in college, so he ended up doing both, and then he ended up going on to be a pro baseball player. But he was able to have pretty successful high school and college career in wrestling. So, I mean, I thought that was really interesting because that kind of motivated me a little bit more, because I was like, well, now I know that's something that runs in my family, because I knew that track ran in my family on my mom's side. My mom's sister is a professional track runner.
Wow.
I had like I come from a good family of athletes, so I kind of that made me feel a little bit like more motivated.
Wow. Did you ever get a chance to like do a little bit of wrestling with your dad at all, or that's probably not going to happen? No.
I don't think that's gonna ever happen.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I haven't seen him since I was 2, so
okay.
I don't know if that we'll ever be able to grapple or roll together. But I mean, I don't know. He's getting a little bit older, but wishful thinking.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think one thing we definitely should applaud is that it sounds like your mom raised a pretty good kid, man. Like your mom did a really good job with you.
I appreciate that. And my mom, she worked really hard being a single mother and not having much help, just raising us and keeping me out of trouble,
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times, you don't hear too many success stories with that type of upbringing. So, I'm just like fortunate for the people that have come into my life, mentors that have come into my life. One of my mentors, Mr. Hudson in high school, really helped me stay out of trouble, took me on my first college tour to Morehouse, things like that.
Wow.
Are what really helped me along my journey to staying out of trouble and just becoming a successful adult, and so I credit that to the people that have made an influence in my life, as well, definitely my mother for sure being that main person for me.
Yeah, I mean, there's old saying that it takes a village to raise a boy, basically, and it is true. Like you had all these other mentors, all these other good things, institutions too, like sports, to really help you throughout those tough years in middle school, high school, etc.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, for sure, I believe that that it takes a lot more than just one person. Everybody is influenced by the different people that come in their life. So it's like it's like essential that the right people are in your life, and I'm just fortunate that I had the right people. My mom, moving us around, most of the time was to help us out. She moved us to Montgomery County because Montgomery County is really good schools. So she
Yeah.
wanted us to be in some better schools than where we were before. So that really was helpful,
Mhm.
being in Montgomery County and going to some of these schools and kind of seeing some of the things that I saw was very helpful and monumental into that as well.
Yeah, yeah. A very similar story. I had a friend who went to one of those schools in the DC in DC. I don't remember which one, but he told me like he got his lunch money like taken from him every day. It was that bad. And then he came to my high school and he seemed to do pretty well. So yeah, it's like schools, as much as like people tend to quote unquote shit on public schools, the quality of public schools really vary too. And there, you can find a good one. And I think that's one of the things that my parents they tried also to really like put me in a good one, because it varies, right? Even in Montgomery County, where it's known to have good public schools, the quality of the schools vary too a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, like you say you went to Walter Johnson, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like Walter Johnson is like like up here. Gaithersburg wasn't like the best school in Montgomery County. I still think, but compared to some other
Yeah.
districts,
Yeah.
it has it's a very good school. So that's very true. Being a teacher now, you really I see it, the disparities. I'm teacher in Atlanta, and the schools on the southern part of town are a lot different than the school on the northern part of town. The disparities are huge, but there are definitely some really good public schools out there. Then there's some other public schools that really need that really need us, like good teachers, but also really need a lot of support from the communities and the parents. Like they're
Hmm.
lacking in that, and so like people do look down on public schools, but I would say some of the best teachers I've met are public school teachers, public school.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think I had some really good teachers in high school who like helped me. Like I was getting into trouble sometimes in high school too, but like it's like I had teachers to kind of like email and like talk to, right? So like it really like, and it makes me want to reach out to some of those teachers again, thank them a little bit. Like you had your Mr. Hudson, I had like Miss Gates and some other people. Really, just like I could just talk to them whenever.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's like interesting enough. Like Mr. Hudson actually didn't teach at my school. He was actually a police officer in our community, but he ran a program that called the Brothers. So the Brothers program was actually like a mentoring program, and he actually had another chapter at Einstein High School as well. So and he just helped make sure that um he made sure that we were staying involved in the community. We had meetings on Fridays where we dressed up. So, he helped us value the importance of dressing for success and things like that. So, like, definitely community leaders like that are extremely important as well, and extremely monumental for the growth of students, on top of the teachers, because the students see the teachers every day, and a lot of students either like or they don't like their teachers, but sometimes they need that outside influence from community leaders to help them, kind of get where they need to be. And then like, like with sports, like coaches are a lot of times those community leaders that a lot of students need.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and I basically until senior year of high school, I didn't do much like extracurriculars. So I definitely wish I did more of that, because I wish I had other like community leaders or other even churches. I never went to church until like 3 years ago. So like even like church leaders who could really help me. So yeah, it really takes a village. And also, Devon, I was going to ask you. So besides coaching baseball, what else do you teach?
Oh, so I actually currently I teach sixth grade science. Certified to do I'm certified to do middle grade science and mathematics. So, I've done tutorials in math and science, and so teaching earth science. When I first started, I was doing physical science, which is 8th grade. So and then besides baseball, I also coached softball. So I coached the softball team at the middle school. So I've had like a lot, some good experiences. This is now going into my 3rd year.
Wow.
Because of the coronavirus, we went completely virtual for education. So now I'm getting used to teaching. How we're interviewing right now. Using virtual technology. Last night I watched the NFL draft, and I was very impressed that they were able to put on the whole draft going completely virtual.
Wow.
So things are changing. And I'm just excited to kind of be a part of the journey. Learning new things and stuff.
And I will say what Devon's teaching is so important. It's so important. Like, I was blessed that in middle school I had some good science teacher and I had some good math teachers. My 8th grade science teacher was a little wacko, but like everything else, all the other teachers I had in the STEM were extremely good. They were extremely good. And I'm sure that's what made me take more STEM classes in high school. And it's what made me still, I'll still watch documentaries on science and math and stuff like that. But I know STEM is one of the most important things for society, but if you don't catch a kid's interest, he's never going to do it again. And that's the importance of teachers that early. And so it's awesome, Devon, that like I can tell you're a fun science teacher, and I can tell like the kids probably listen to you. They're not going to goof off too much, and like that's the perfect type of science teacher.
Yeah, I have to have my modes. Like sometimes I got to be the disciplinarian, but sometimes I can be the fun guy. Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with your point. Having that one teacher that sparks your interest, because my interest in math was really sparked by my 5th grade teacher.
Yeah.
My 5th grade teacher kind of showed me that I was a very strong math student. So he asked me if I wanted to test out of 5th grade math and try to do 6th grade math, and before I didn't even know that was possible, because we didn't do that in New Jersey. And we didn't do that in PG County, so I didn't even know that was possible until I got to 5th grade, and he noticed that. And then when I did, that gave me the confidence to really love math. I mean, I really started to love math from then on, and it was like there was not much that could take my interest away. And that was starting in 5th grade, and to this day, I still love math as a topic. So that's very true. I agree with that.
Yeah, this is such an interesting conversation because it reminds me of funny stuff too. Like in 5th grade, we had this like she ran the math department or something in our elementary school. And she was this like old, slightly racist white lady, and like she set me as below average in math, even though like I still remember like she erased some of my answers or something, and I was about to cry. Like she was testing me to see my math level, and she erased some of my answers. And like I had just come to America, so I went back to China for a few years after growing up in the Midwest. So like I didn't like it was my first year in American schools. I didn't know how to stand up for myself, so I was just like. I was looking around, I'm like, did you guys see she's erasing my answers, trying to make me below average in math? I'm like, well, what's, she's like, but you always get like, you mentioned how your dad had a coach who was like a little racist too, right? We all have like, thank goodness it's not as much anymore as the new generation is more kind of like diverse and stuff, but we always have these moments, and like, thank goodness I didn't get my math completely ruined, but my love for math probably died a little bit that day. I'm going to be completely honest.
Yeah, I mean, it could have that impact, and like you said, yeah, with this new age, it's definitely changing, thankfully, because I joined, like, the way I got into teaching was through Teach for America, which is like a pretty popular nonprofit, and one of the things that they emphasize is DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, like now I'm noticing that a lot of younger teachers are really knowledgeable in DEI, but a lot of times the older teachers are not. And they're not. A lot of older teachers are not aware of how to be inclusive of people of all races and all ethnic backgrounds. So I mean, I hate to hear that happened, because that's just super insensitive. Like that people are even like that.
Yeah, exactly. But ultimately, thank goodness, even though she did that, deep down at heart, I knew I'm better than math than most of my classmates. Not because I'm smarter, just because I learned more in China. In China, they really push you. I was learning how to factor in third grade. Not I didn't understand what I was doing. I was failing, but at least I was. They were trying to teach you how to factor, which factoring is like a sixth grade or
Yeah.
seventh grade thing in most American schools. So that's why I knew my math was not as bad as what this teacher was trying to make my math look like.
Yeah. No, I mean it's true. Yeah, I went to I was fortunate enough that like when I was like in kindergarten or so, I went to an international at the time my mom was able to get me into an international private school and it was actually a private school that was I believe it was Nigerian based. And so they were a little bit more advanced than the common schools, like the common American schools. And I actually learned multiplication when I was like in kindergarten. So,
Wow.
and my sister was, I think, in second grade at the time, and I had learned multiplication before she did. So I was
Hmm.
helping her with her multiplication. So it was kind of like crazy, and that's when I realized like a lot of times international schools just a lot faster paced. So and yeah, I definitely learned that from a young age.
Wow. Wow. That's awesome. Do you think one day potentially you might start some kind of nonprofit to help students, or do you think? I mean, you have a lot on your plate, so do you think right now it's enough for you?
No, no, it's definitely my goal one day to lead a school,
Hmm.
or lead an organization. So that's definitely something I look forward to in the future. Potentially, hopefully, leading a school. Like there's a lot of new types of charter schools coming up.
Hmm.
And with different models and different visions, and I think they're super important, especially for the students in the areas that I serve now. And I work on the south side of Atlanta, and the economic disparity is it's horrible. Some of the economic problems that some of the kids face. I see a lot of myself, my young self, and a lot of the students that I teach. So my goal is to one day, also be like lead a school like that does education or looks at education from a different lens, not just the traditional lens that we've been looking at education through since the 1800s, because things need to change. Technology has changed. The way people think has changed. Our attention spans have changed. We
Yeah.
have phones now, so things are so different, and a lot of schools don't move with the time. So I like to see that there are a lot of younger, people with a lot of different ideologies starting schools. I would like to be one of those people one day.
Yeah, it reminds me of probably one of the funniest stories from my high school. We had this teacher who just couldn't adapt to the times, and he was later fired for good reason. But our school, because it was Walter Johnson High School, right? We got smart boards. We're one of the first schools to get smart boards. Yeah, smart boards, you can tap on it and like make it do stuff kind of like a computer. And this teacher didn't understand what a smart board is, and using a marker, he started writing on the smart
Oh,
boards.
yeah, it's no good.
Yeah, yeah. So, but he was a bad teacher, and he ruined most. He was a physics teacher, and he ruined probably every kid's love for physics. It's so sad. I still
Yeah,
don't do physics because that teacher ruined it for me. It's not completely his fault. I can always get into it again, but it's hard when all you remember is you can't understand what he's saying. He's twitching his lip all the time, and he's getting mad at you for no reason. It's like,
yeah. It makes me wonder, like, what was the school doing to make sure that he caught up with the new technology? Like, they should have been doing some type of professional development to help him become more up with the technology. Like you can't just give this man a new board and not tell him how to use it. So.
yeah, yeah,
But yeah, I mean that definitely happens. Like sometimes there's that one teacher that just makes you hate a topic, and you don't
yeah,
even know why you hate it.
yeah.
But you can trace it back to a teacher that gave you a hard time in a certain topic, and then it's like it is kind of hard to overcome that. And then then on the other hand, there's that one teacher that makes you love something, like that makes you love reading because they had you reading a book that you were interested in. So
Yeah, exactly. Um, It's funny you did Teach for America because quite a few of my classmates actually did Teach for America too, and I considered it too, but I was just so lost in college. I didn't know what I was doing, so I needed some time just to kind of like think after college. But Teach for America sounds like one of those like it's I know it's pretty tough for some of the people in the program, but it's so necessary because it's like one of the only ways you can get people to kind of have perspective. Like these people who graduated from their ivory towers, right? They're like good schools, but then they have to remember, okay, I have to not forget about other people in society. I can't just like keep moving up. I'm like, oh yeah, look at these people. So that's why I really like what Teach for America trying to do.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, yeah, I would encourage like if if I would encourage a lot more people to look into programs like Teach for America, but I would also, it's my wish is that Teach for America spent a little bit more time kind of grooming teachers to be prepared for the level of work that they're going into, because
Yeah.
a lot of teachers don't understand, or a lot of Teach for America teachers don't understand the magnitude of what's going on.
Yeah.
Um, you can't just go into teaching, and think that, okay, I had a very privileged background and now I can change the world. Sometimes it's not going to work out that way. But it's good to have the high hopes, but it's like sometimes it's not good. But I do encourage a lot more people to look into becoming educators. I mean, because your skills or whatever, whatever background you come from, your skills and your knowledge of the world is important for the next generation of youth. And then also, teaching is a good job, especially for a time like now where we're going through an economic recession. No matter what country you live in, there's always a need for educators.
Yeah.
There's always a need. There's certain jobs where there's always a need. There's always a need for educators. There's always a need for nurses. There's always a need for doctors and other public service professions. So, I would definitely encourage more people to join Teach for America or join other like there's like City Year and there's like Relay, all these other programs. Like I encourage more people to join and really look into the beauties of education. It's such a misunderstood profession. A lot of people don't understand how amazing it can be. Because a lot of people think about how hard school was and the type of stuff they put their teachers through, but it's rewarding at the end of the day. So especially if you find what you love in it and really cater to that. So.
Yeah. And just when I was in college, junior year of college, I went to one of these schools. So, for University of Pennsylvania, where I went to college, it's situated in West Philadelphia, right? And University of Pennsylvania has been slowly, and Drexel together, they've been slowly gentrifying the area, like a lot, but it changed a lot over the years, right? And when I went to University of Pennsylvania, West Philadelphia still had a little bit of West Philadelphia flair. Like now, if you go to West Philadelphia now, it's basically all just like people who work at Penn or live near Penn or study at Penn. It's not like West Philly anymore. But when I was there, I spent a semester. I would go all the way, like very, very far into West Philadelphia to tutor, and I honestly didn't make a difference, and I know it now, but I got to see some interesting stuff. Like the teachers there, man, we're talking about teaching, right? The teachers there were all miserable. This was an elementary school. They were always yelling at the students, just like, it's like, you understand, like these students already have a lot of problems at home. Most of them, their dads are in jail and stuff like that. And I get it, they'll act out in school, but like as a teacher, don't be another disciplinarian. I remember that I would always think about that. I still would think about it. I'm just like, how would you teach, like you said, groom the teachers to be better? Like, don't yell at the kids. Yes, the kids might talk back. They might act out. They might have ADD or something. Is the right way to keep yelling at them? I've always thought about that.
Yeah, no, like it's difficult because it's hard for a lot of teachers to find that proper balance between disciplinarian and not. I think a lot of teachers lose themselves in the idea that they have to be in control of every situation.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the biggest issue. A lot of times we as teachers feel like we have to be in control of every situation, when a lot of times we're not in control of certain situations, because no matter what we do and say, we cannot control how our students react to what we do and say. So, a lot of times teachers do just get fed up, especially dealing with tougher schools. They just get fed up and get to a point where there's no more reasoning. It's just yelling. And And that comes down to having really good, like I said before, like professional development, like teaching teachers how to deal with certain situations, teaching teachers how to overcome those type of things. And to what you said, I know you said you probably didn't make an impact, but you never know. There might be a student out there right now that remembers you tutoring them and still thinks about the things they learned from you. And that's what makes it rewarding. You probably don't know which student it is, and you probably don't know where they are right now, but they're probably thinking about you right now. There's probably a student right now thinking about like when you tutored them. It's a lot of times that's what happens. It's always the small things that you don't realize have the impact. That's what keeps me going, because it's like I didn't realize, I thought I wasn't making any impact, because last year I was getting complaints about my classroom management not being very great, and all this stuff. And then I realized that the work is more important than just being able to keep students quiet and keep them doing work. The work goes beyond that. It's like about, the students feeling safe at school. A lot of times they don't feel safe at home. So them feeling safe at school is important. Them feeling like they can look up to somebody. So you might not even realize how much of an impact you might have made just from making the kids feel safe, or trusting you just in that moment.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I think that's a good piece of advice for people in any career paths. Like most people don't realize the impact they have because they're like we're our own worst critics, right? And of course, psychologically, there's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. The people that are the most qualified also think they're like they think they're the least qualified, but that's what makes them the most qualified. They're always improving. So I think this is just a good lesson for whether people do jiu-jitsu or people do whatever, coach baseball, people want to learn an instrument. It's like, just remember that. Like, you're your worst critic. And so from what Devon's saying, just remember, you're probably making a good impact if you think you're not making a good impact, because it takes awareness to think you're not making a good impact.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, that self-awareness is what will keep you improving on your craft. Because I definitely do that all the time. I mean, I beat myself up a lot about things that I could improve. It's like every day I'm self-reflecting, but that's, that can be good and bad. Sometimes it might put too much pressure on you, and then you might end up to the point where you're just one of those teachers that's just frustrated every day. But it's definitely good to definitely self-reflect and figure out how you can improve. But there's like got to be that balance of, how do I self-reflect without stressing myself out? Like that's like, I don't know, that's like one of the hardest things to do. That's like the hardest pill for a lot of people to swallow, is that like sometimes self-reflecting too much might lead to adding more unnecessary stress. And I think, like, honestly, this whole quarantine thing has kind of helped me learn how to balance that a little bit. Spending more time at home, kind of more time to myself, just figuring out like, how do I balance that? Me feeling like I have to improve on something, but also me sitting back and enjoying some of the fruits of my labor. It's a tough balance there.
Yeah, exactly. And one last thing I'll mention about the whole tutoring thing I used to do is the one time I felt like I was effective was when, and it's like you said, it's like a lot of times it's like simple stuff. Like one of the kids I was teaching, I think she was a fourth grader, but she was very below in her in the assessment of what her reading ability was. So I was just reading with her. And then some of her friends wanted to come read, and like they weren't part of the group, but I said, okay, yeah, you guys can come. We can read together. So we all took turns reading. And I felt like, wow, like that was the first time they actually wanted to read with me. And so I think about that, and I'm like, how can whether a school or a tutoring program or nonprofit foster that, right? It felt like so many things that we were trying to do with the kids, they felt like, oh, we're doing this stupid thing again. But then that one time when they all wanted to read with me, they all wanted to just do it. It wasn't like I was forcing them. They wanted to do it. So how do we like not create so much structure, but also create a little bit of structure? It's like that, I feel like, is like the central balance, the central struggle of like a lot of, especially when you're educating younger kids. Like, how do you give them enough structure, but not too much? Right. And I think most educational programs, especially you and I were in Montgomery County, County, there's way too many tests, way too many like, oh, we're just always assessing you. It's like, that's not the point of education.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. Like, and like you touched on a good point. Like, a lot of times the kids value a lot more when they have some autonomy over their own education. So, like, when I can choose what I want to do, it makes me want to learn even more.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm not just forcing work at you. You know, you have to do
Hmm.
this worksheet. You have to do this paper. You have to do. You know, like a lot of the best assignments are the ones that you get to choose. I learned that when I did this thing that we call problem-based learning. We did problem-based learning where you give the students a problem and you let them figure out how they want to solve the problem using research and how they want to present it. So I allowed students some choice on how they can present their projects. And I mean, I tell you, I was very impressed by some of the ideas that the students came up with. I had students do videos. I had students build things. I've had students, make posters. You know, then you got to see what type of learners you're working with. Not every student wants to make a trifold poster,
Yeah.
right? Some students want to create an app.
Yeah.
I mean, we have some students that will go as far as creating an app, and we've got some students that want to do a PowerPoint. So I realized that there is like a lot of value in giving students choice. But the problem is, you know, like you said, we're just testing all the time. And I've been I've been strategizing this for a long time. You know, what is a good way to assess our students' learning without constantly testing them? I'm getting ready to start a program for my Master of Art in Teaching at Georgia State University. So I'm getting ready to start my master's, and I'm hoping to learn a lot more about pedagogy and kind of the science behind it, how we teach and why we teach a certain way. And I would like to learn, you know, in my educational journey, what are some different ways, like that's something that I'm going to take back with me and continue to think about. What are some different ways to assess our students' learning without testing them? You know, I mean, it's like the same thing with anything you do. I mean, even in martial arts, you gotta, you know, in order to belt test people, you gotta figure out that they're actually learning what you've been teaching them for the past however many years. So, you know, that's something that, like, I'm sure there's a lot of other educators tackling this issue, while there's some educators that don't think about it.
Yeah.
You know, just like whatever, we give them the test. If they fail, they fail. But I don't believe it. I just believe that, like, there should be other ways. I mean, especially like as a science teacher, you know, like they want us to do a lot of lab-based learning, you know, give labs and stuff. My problem is, like, if I do a lab in science and you give me a written test, I can't really express how much I learned in that lab from doing it hands-on if I'm just doing a written test.
Yeah.
You know, like that's an issue for me. So like that's something that I think we really need to work on.
Yeah. And from my memories in high school, and even I took a few science classes in college too, lab reports, right? Those lab notebooks were the dread of my science. No matter how much I loved science, I just hated writing those lab reports because, like, I learned it, but I don't want to, like, write about it per se. Like, give me another way to express that I learned it. I don't want to, like, be like, okay, I did this cool experiment. Now we have to answer like 20 questions about it and do a bunch of like math problems. It's like, no, why don't we then just skip lab and just watch a video on it and then learn the same thing? Like, there's a point to do it kinesthetically, and I felt like you shouldn't, the takeaway shouldn't be, oh yeah, now I'm doing a lab report and I have to get an A on it or else I'm not going to get a good grade in this class. Like,
yeah, like you said, like, why couldn't I do this lab? Like, I did it kinesthetically. I was hands-on. Why can't I take this lab and make a video out of it? Why can't I take this lab and present it a different way? Why do I have to write out a lab report? You know, it shouldn't be the same way of doing things every time. I mean, that's such an archaic way of thinking that we kind of have to get out of, because that's what's kind of holding back education, especially in economically disparate areas. This archaic system of education just hasn't been working. And it worked at one point, and that one point was in the 1800s. I mean, it's 2020. We got to come up with some other strategies here.
Yeah. I read somewhere that it worked when people were training to go to the factories to work their lives off, basically to work until they die. So I don't think that's where people are now. We have a higher HDI, Human Development Index, than let's train people to be basically, unfortunately, like slaves in a factory. We're not training people to do that anymore.
Right, exactly. We're not training people to work until they die. A lot of our students are going to be entrepreneurs. A lot of our students are going to be artists. A lot of our students, there's so many different avenues. to be successful in, and success is not just getting a job and working until you get a retirement check. You know, success is setting out your goals and achieving them. So you know, there's so many different ways to do that nowadays. So we got to kind of keep up with the time.
Yeah, agreed. And I think if we explore more ways for students to learn, it would help teachers thrive too. Because certain teachers are better teaching certain way. I still remember my last year of taking chemistry in high school. One teacher was really good just teaching the kind of the normal way, right? She would teach you kind of the normal way, but you would learn so much from her. The other teacher I had the next semester was so bad teaching that way. But you know what he was good at? Eventually he kind of realized like he needed to do it differently because she set the bar so high for that method he couldn't do it the same. So he kind of shifted towards the end of the semester. It was too late. Nobody understood anything by then. But for the last assignment, he's like, dude, you can make a video, you could do whatever. And we made a video. My team made a video and we like learned and we like presented it. It was really cool. But like I felt like if he didn't feel bottlenecked originally when he started the teaching job and he was allowed to like explore more ways of reaching students, having students learn, he would have been a much more effective teacher than what he ended up as.
Yeah, I mean, and I agree because it's just like students. You know, students learn many different ways. We have so many different. I mean, teachers teach different ways. So you know, the same way students learn different ways, teachers teach different ways. So. You know, and I believe that, you know, allowing teachers, you know, to kind of have their own way of teaching without it having to be this set way also helps a little bit too.
Yeah, 100%, man. So, dude, this was such a great conversation, and I'm glad Winston connected me with you because I didn't expect we'd talk about this subject, but this makes it so I can put this conversation on 3 channels of mine, which is awesome because, you know, I have a channel that talks about education sometimes. I have a channel that, like, it's more edited, so I could put this like more edited on that channel. And then, of course, I can put this on Fight Commentary. But I'm really happy we're exploring this topic because education's been one of those things that America's always fallen behind. And now it's like a perfect opportunity because of, like you said, the quarantine and technology. It's the perfect time for people to kind of explore new ways because we have to. We literally can't do the old system anymore.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I definitely appreciate this conversation. I love being able to talk about education and also martial art. I mean, this is what I do every day. This is my passion. I wake up every day and live for this. So, you know, and it's true. I mean, there's definitely, now that we've you've been forced to go virtual, I mean, it's really allowing for different avenues of teaching. You know, different methods are now, you know, but at the same time, it's putting some kids at a disadvantage, you know, because not everybody has access to technology. So at this point, it's kind of forcing districts to give the students what they need to be able to keep up with the times. I've noticed that a lot of my students still don't know how to properly use a computer. And that's something that we should have been teaching them for a long time.
Yeah.
Because you know, that's important. We're in the 21st. We're in the 21st century. It's 2020. It's going to be 2021 before we know it.
Yep.
And one day our students are going to be in the workforce, and they're going to have to know how to use a computer. They're going to have to know how to navigate virtually with technology. We don't know what this what this spread of the coronavirus is going to do moving forward for a lot of industries. So, you know, I think this is an important time now for our students to be able to catch up and really learn how to navigate, because there's like a misconception that like because kids are young they know technology, and that's just not true. That's like, in my opinion, that's a very classist ideology, because that's assuming that they grew up with all this technology, and a lot of them did not. And I experienced the same thing. To this day, I'm like, you know, people are like, you must be a 73-year-old in a 23-year-old's body, but I'm like, no, I didn't grow up with a whole lot of technology. Even though it was around me, I didn't have access to all the latest technology like everyone else did. And there's certain things I still am learning to this day about technology. So, you know, I hope that this brings new opportunities for a lot of our students to not only catch up with technology, but become more advanced. And then for teachers to get out of that mindset that they were in of there's this one way of teaching, and to really explore these different methods and avenues, and for principals as well. It's very important for school leaders to have this different mindset of how education can look.
Yeah, Exactly. I think it's such a great point you made about how, people assume if you're young, right, technology. It's kind of like um, schools should fill certain needs, and schools should be kind of like an equalizer, right? Give people kind of the equal opportunity, basically. And if schools don't fulfill that, they're failing students. Like another example I can think of is people who didn't grow up with money. How can you expect them to know how to manage money if you don't teach it to them? But schools never teach finance, man. Like we take algebra 2 and pre-calculus and calculus, but none of that has like a life skill type of like application. They could cater it towards that, but they never do.
They never do. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I was going to say, shout out to Prince George's County Public Schools. I heard that they signed a bill that they're requiring students now to take financial literacy as a prerequisite for graduation. That's so important in my opinion.
Important.
Because there's a lot of students that graduate and they do not know how to manage their money, but much less their money. They don't know how to apply for loans. They don't know how to apply for scholarships for school. These were all things that I suffered with. I learned a lot about my money management during my time at Morehouse. I didn't learn any of this in high school. If I had not gone to Morehouse, if I had gone to the workforce, I don't think that my results would be the same. So I definitely, even watching the draft last night, the NFL draft, I was like, man, I hope that these guys have great mentors helping them manage all this money they're going to make.
Yeah.
These guys are going to be, they're 21, 22, 23 years old, making millions and millions of dollars, more money they've ever seen in their life, most of them. So, I'm hoping that somebody is helping them manage their finances. Like we should definitely incorporate that in schools. That's so important.
Yeah. And for example, you and I spent time in the DC area, so we were around a lot of people that are very worldly, a lot of people that know a lot about government. But that's an assumption that I think educators need to not make too, right? So because we live in a democracy, everyone has to be an informed voter. Everyone needs to know what our country was founded on and like how our country works. And I feel like that is also something that's lacking in our schools. Like, I think Montgomery County required you to take at least one like government type class.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's like a thing for every school district. Like, so it's like, in my opinion, people should come out of school knowing four things, right? One is the technology thing, like being able to catch up with the times. But the second thing is money management, because money runs in the world. We have to know how to be able to afford stuff. And then knowing how our country, how do you be a citizen in this world? Civics, basically. That's something I don't think schools really emphasize anymore. And the fourth thing is like emotional intelligence / like social skills, right? How do you build community? How do you reach out to people? How do you not say F you to everyone? I feel like, and schools fail at all four of these things.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Like those are kind of the main things that you really should know before going out into the world. I mean, you've got to know basic reading, writing, arithmetic, but you also need to know the skills that are important to survive in society.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so important. You should, no one should have to learn those things the hard way. I mean, if we're required to be in school for 12 years, in those 12 years, you should learn those skills before going out into the world, in my opinion.
Yeah. And like you said, I didn't learn a lot of the finance stuff until after college. Like you are smart. You learned it in college. I had to stumble the hard way. Like 1 year, one of the companies that paid me didn't send me the 1099, right? And then the IRS came after me years later. But nobody taught me that stuff. So yeah. I had to pay a fine, and then I realized, oh, okay, so these are things. But you don't want to be learning the hard way like that.
Right. Yeah, you definitely don't want to have to wait till the IRS is knocking on your door.
Yeah.
That should be something you learn about in high school.
Yeah.
How do I pay my taxes? How do I file? How do I get a return?
Yeah.
How do I apply for a business loan? Not everybody's gonna go to college. Yeah. Right. Of course, when you go to college, they don't care what your credit score is. You're going to get a loan. They're going to give you a loan to go to school.
Yeah.
But, what if I don't want to go to college? I want to outright use that money that I would use for college to start a business. How do I get my credit up to get a business loan? How do I purchase a home? These things are important because not everybody's going to go to school. Not everyone's going to go to college. So, some people are going straight to the military. Some people are going straight to the workforce. Especially, in the area that we're from, military is huge in the DC metropolitan area. So, you're right. I mean, those things are extremely important.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. Devon, I think we should bring you back and we should talk even more about education. Like this could be a whole topic in itself, but when you have time, let's think of more topics in education that we can explore, because this is definitely something that I'm interested in. And I actually started a channel where I thought about maybe I teach math to people. So maybe we can have you talk about STEM education on that channel. That can be a segment on that channel or something. But this is so interesting. And, I've always flirted with the idea that maybe one day I'd become an educator. So this is kind of evoking some of those love again. So I have to thank you for, talking about this stuff on all these channels that this talk's going to get on.
Hey, I appreciate it. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I look forward to coming back. And if you want, I have some other educators and potentially martial artists that I could have come and chat with you. So, that would, for sure. I would love that.
Totally. Yeah. So we'll follow up on that. Any educator that wants to talk, definitely they can reach out to me, whether they see this video or you connect me with them. 100%. I'm down. So, this is great. And these are the conversations we need to be having. We can't, talking about how to better educate people and how to, change with the times is something we always need to talk about. It's that's one of the few things to never brush under the rug, man. The other thing is just conflicts between people, right? When there's conflict, you always don't brush it under the rug. But that's another conversation for another time, too.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, most definitely.
Definitely. So, guys, this is Devon. Devon, do you want to give your social media at all, or if you want to, I can put it in the description and pin comments too.
Yeah. So my Instagram is at Devon_S. My page is private, so follow and I will accept your follow request. As long as your page is not sketchy or anything.
Exactly.
But yeah, I'm also on Twitter at @DSouthly, but I don't use Twitter very much. So, just Instagram is cool. And yeah, I appreciate it. Everybody that's watching this and everybody that is thinking about education and martial arts. I hope that this will inspire the next person to jump into education or to jump into martial arts.
Exactly. So whether this goes on Fight Commentary Breakdowns or some other channel, guys, thank you so much. Share this with everyone. Leave your questions for Devon, so when we bring him back, we'll have more topics in addition to the topics that Devon and I might talk about in the future. So Devon, I'm going to start recording. We continue talking. But for those of you watching, talk to you next time.